You could say she's like a prairie fire. You could say she's like a. Oh, you could say she's like a prairie fire. A soaring spirit riding on the flames of her desire. If you feel a burden in your soul tonight, prairie fire is the name you'll know her by. Look how you light the midnight sky. Prairie fire, tell us why.
Hi everyone and welcome to Prairie Fire. I'm Sarah Edwards. You know, ever since I moved back to the Midwest after 16 years on the West Coast, I've really wanted to go morel mushroom hunting. People seem to go nuts about it here in Illinois. It's supposed to be competitive and kind of mysterious and tons of fun, and all of this to find these rare mushrooms that sell for a lot of money. So I finally got in touch with two crazy morel mushroom hunters who really embody the spirit of morel madness to give us a proper look at what a real mushroom hunt is all about.
Follow my lead.
How can I follow your lead if you told
gotta
me to
say
go
your
first?
name.
Oh, my name is Julie,
I'm Rui Sandusky.
and we are going on a mushroom hunt.
This is not following leads.
Oh, sorry.
So where are we?
We cannot reveal.
We are in the woods.
Yeah, no.
We're in the woods. We are in a county. Can we tell them that? Yeah, we're in Vermilion County. And we are on public property, not private property.
You're not going to reveal your location?
We
No.
can't, no, we can't tell. This is, it's
Mushroom hunters don't reveal their locations.
yeah. You know, mushroom hunting is a lot like fishing. You have to be okay with not getting anything. Even though I say that, I say that like you have to be okay. I get mad.
We're not
if I don't
okay.
find anything. I pout.
The terminology for going mushroom hunting and not finding any is called getting skunked. You don't want that to happen.
I think I started hunting, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. I love the hunt of these because these are just elusive. It's like treasure hunting.
Yeah, I always kind of liken it to an adult scavenger hunt.
The ground has to be right. All the elements has to be right for these little suckers to pop. You need
the moisture.
moisture, you need humidity.
And you can kind of tell even just by springing on it, like if the ground is good.
You need proper nutrients because if you don't have all those things, then you won't find any.
Sometimes it's good to just stop and turn around when you're hunting. Just pause in one place for a moment and you see things like that right there on the hill, sticking right out.
I see it. It's so nice and squishy.
And that's the other thing too, is normally
See that?
if you find one, you will find another.
So there's real morels, there's false morels, and the way to tell a real morel, I've never done this, but I'll do this for the sake of it. It's hollow all the way through. False morels will be solid.
And if you eat a false morel?
Well, you'll probably die. You got to know what you're picking because you could die.
Well, I found it anyway.
Oh, whatever. Up.
Do you find one?
Yep. I'm waiting for one of you guys to see it. It's so exciting, you guys. When you first spot one, it's like so exciting.
You got to get your mushroom
The thrill
eyes.
of the hunt. Isn't this great?
Oh, look at that.
Yes. Oh, look at this.
He is fresh. That's a nice one.
And you always have to cook these things. Always cook them.
You have to rinse these really well when you before you cook them, and you can take the water that has all the spores and stuff in it and dump it wherever. And eventually, some people have said that they've had mushrooms grow up in their yard and things from doing that.
You can cook them in butter, wine. I like to bread them a little bit, fry them. They're in such high demand. Chefs use them. You know, you can find them in the grocery store for about 50 bucks a pound. It's because they're so rare. That's why they're so expensive. You cannot cultivate these things. They're just too finicky.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's the whistle that I found one. She thinks I found one. Oops.
Well, that's the signal. You can't do the signal if you don't
Yeah,
find
sorry,
one.
that was a signal. The season is usually a few weeks.
It's at least 4 weeks if you start with the early ones. So one of the ways you can find that mushrooms are actually ready to come up in the woods is by the other plant life that you're seeing. One of them is this flower right here, which we've just identified is actually called a bloody butcher. The other thing you can look for is these mayaples. They almost kind of look like little umbrellas, and at least when they first come out, they've unfurled a little bit more at this point. What was it? Oh, the bluebells. These guys here, when the bluebells have flowered, we have some luck finding morels around some bluebell patches too.
I did not know that morels had nicknames. Molly moocher, dryland fish. I have no idea about the molly moocher, but the dryland fish is because when you cut it in half, fry it, it looks like fish. Makes sense.
They still say we should bring a leaf blower out.
I think that'd be cheating.
Nah.
Looky here. Look at this beautiful girl. Look at this yellow. It's a big one.
So you always want to soak them in salt water, and the bigger ones especially cut in half if possible to make sure there's nothing inside them. But if you put them in a Ziploc bag and stick them in the vegetable drawer of your fridge, they'll last several weeks.
There's all kinds of methods for like saving them. You can dehydrate them,
Freeze them.
but just eat them. I mean, that's the best part, is picking them to eat when they're fresh.
Now, I can disclose the location of our next story. It takes place in Rantoul, Illinois. Rantoul used to be the home of Chanute Air Force Base, but these days it's home to a really cool company that's one of the top manufacturers of museum exhibits worldwide. It's called Taylor Studios.
Everything starts with a story. The experience of any exhibit actually starts when you first get out of the car, off the bus, walk up to the building. As soon as you enter the space, the first thing you do as a visitor is you kind of take it all in. What do you see? What's out there? What are they reading? What are they touching? What are they feeling? What are they hearing? We can even do smells. What are they smelling?
Taylor Studios started in 1991. In the 30 years that I ran the company, we did over 700 projects in 45 states and 4 countries. I lived across the street from Joe Taylor, and he was an artist, and he got a job with Gary Breeze, who was a taxidermist at the time. And Gary got a job to make some trees for a nature center, and they had to just sort of figure it out. And then Joe and I realized this was an industry. People built exhibits for a living. You can't beat that. Like, that is so cool. So it was just Joe and I in the beginning, doing the artifact and fossil reproductions, like selling our wares out of the back of the pickup truck, going to events and trade shows. So that was the sort of humble start, but knowing that we wanted to fabricate exhibits for museums. But that kind of got our name out there, and we sold those all over the world. We were in a very old farmhouse in Mahomet. There was a chicken coop on the property that we renovated. And then to the west, there was an old, really beautiful barn, a 2-story wood barn with a big, hayloft. So in 2007, I bought the old Walmart building, which is where we're sitting in today, so that we could do all production under one roof. Exhibits are stories in 3D. In a museum, only about 2% of their collection is on display. So it's really difficult for our clients to decide what story to tell because there are so many. And so you have to pick and choose what you think will engage your audience or what you think the important story of the time is. A good exhibit is an exhibit that can transform you to another time and place.
A project usually starts with a museum or a nature center having an idea. I want a mammoth. All right, that's a good starting point. There's still some interpretation and story to tell there. How is that mammoth interacting with things around it? How do you want to see that mammoth? Is it just looking straight? Is it head up and rear to the left? Is it up on up on 3 legs and one leg's up in the air? Or is it just standing there? Is it grazing in the grass? All those tell a story. The overall process for Taylor Studios' amount of work for one gallery is usually about 18 months. 12 months of design and about 6 months of fabrication and install. The process starts with resource analysis, which is gathering all the resources that the client has. Then we go to schematic design. Schematic design is more of a floor plan layout of the space and kind of divvying up budget. Then after that, then we get into what we call conceptual design. Conceptual design is when we start making the pretty pictures. We start doing some sketches, we put some color to them, we have renderings, and it really starts coming together, give you that visual of the space. Then we go into detail design. Detail design is when you start putting dimensions to those really pretty pictures. You start calling out what materials will be used. And then we start fabricating. We fabricate everything at Taylor Studios in a repurposed Walmart, and we put it together there for the first time. Then we disassemble, we put it into trucks, and we ship it all over the country. Shipping items is an adventure. We always have to think about how does a piece get made in a Walmart in Illinois and get to and inside an exhibit. So a lot of our pieces do come apart, and then they are then reassembled on site and seamed on site. In our life cast figure fabrication method, we used to have to stick straws up someone's nose, have them hold very still, and cover them in alginate. Very claustrophobic, very scary. We've now can 3D scan someone's face and their head, and we print that on a resin printer to give us quite a bit of detail on that face. Then we can paint that head and paint it to look extremely real, let's say. Now, we still use the alginate molding and casting method on hands so that we can get the very fine detail, the pores in your fingers, the little fine cracks in your knuckles. Usually the bodies are carved out of foam. And then after that, the foam is hard-coated. And then we actually have to make limbs removable in many cases to help put on the clothing. The fabrication of exhibits is definitely moving to a more digital age. We have a CNC router to cut wood and plastic. We have a CNC plasma that will cut metal. We have PLA and SLA printers that we can actually 3D print objects. We have a robot arm that can cut foam. but we see them more as a tool. You still have to have that artist's eye, and I think the human element of it and the artistic element will always be there, and that's what really will give you a dynamic exhibit.
A lot of our client base is natural history or a lot of nature centers.
But art museums are then a completely different ballgame, right? But I think the problem is with art museums is they're not drawing new audiences. You know, so it's almost like hoity-toity and you feel like I'm not rich enough to be in here or something. So are you gonna draw people from all the neighborhoods into this museum when they feel uncomfortable because you've designed this space to feel like you don't belong here?
We can't do that in this industry. We are in competition for people's leisure time, so it has to be an exhibit that will draw people in and they want to be there because they could just put a virtual reality set on and stay at home. But I think, you know, once again, it's about a sense of place or the authenticity of a real object. I think that is so much more impactful, emotional, authentic than any virtual reality experience could be. So I sold Taylor Studios in December of 2021. I think a little bit, after 30 some years, I hate to admit this, but I was a bit wore out. You know, so all my sleepless nights were about the people. You know, I mean, there's always cash flow crunches and are we gonna make sales and is this client happy? But it's about your people. And so I knew that was important to take care of the staff and to take care of the legacy we've built here as Taylor Studios. You know, as the older you get, the more risk averse you become. And I knew we needed to go in a different direction and build the digital fabrication studio, but you have to invest. Reggie is doing that, and so that's really exciting for Taylor Studios right now. So it's time for me to just manage sheep and horses.
If you have kids like I do, or grandkids, or maybe you're just feeling like a kid and you want to kill a couple hours with some retro entertainment, go to McLean, Illinois. A guy there with a passion for pinball has turned a downtown building into a gamer's paradise.
I'm John Yates. I am the creator and owner of Arcadia, America's Playable Arcade Museum, and all the other arcade-related attractions here in McLean, Illinois. My first memory of video games was actually at my church. There was a guy at the church that owned a chain of donut stores, and he also had games in all his donut stores, and he also donated some games to the church. And there was this old Pong game, just one of these tabletop generic things where the ball bounces back and forth. Incredibly boring, but it was just mesmerizing to me. My parents did not mind me playing the games at the church because they were free, and they didn't mind me hanging out at the arcade, but they thought it was a total waste of money, so they never gave me any money to play games when I was a kid. Most of my time at the arcade was spent just socializing with my friends and watching other people play games and just longing to play them myself. I think I had a mild case of oppositional defiant disorder maybe, and just the fact that they didn't want me to play them gave me even more of a passion to want to play them. From a very early age, I learned that I was good at fixing things, and I think really what I've learned is anybody can be good at fixing things. What differentiates people is willingness to take things apart and try to fix them. For me, ever since I was a little kid, something's not working, or even if it is working, let's take this thing apart and see how it works. I am an entrepreneur. I mean, since I was a little kid. I mean, in third grade, I started my first business selling paper airplanes. It's a long, windy road, but it leads to me getting kind of stuck in this coin-operated industry. I needed a place to store all the vending machines I was acquiring, and I found this abandoned garage behind my apartment building in Champaign. Found the owner, called him, and he said, "Oh yeah, you can rent that garage from me, but you got to clean it out. It's full of junk." So I cut the lock off of it, opened the door, and it was full of arcade games. like 20 old video games. Needless to say, I was very thrilled to have that project. Yeah, and it changed everything, because then I realized, oh man, these are a lot more fun to work on. And if I can find locations to put them in, I make money without having to stock them. You know, with soda machines, you've got to keep buying soda and going out every week and filling it up. With a video game, you just plug it in somewhere, come back a month later, and it's full of money. It just seemed like magic. I worked as a programmer for about 5 years. Then I got a job at a startup out in San Jose, California. Then I did my own startup. And all of these startups failed miserably. I lost lots of other people's money. So I came back from California kind of with my tail between my legs, not sure what I wanted to do. So I decided I would renovate one of my buildings. And I got the building done, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. I was going to put a for rent sign in the window, and I thought, well, I'll just fill it with games and put a for rent sign in the window and see if anybody nibbles. So I did that, filled it up with all my favorite video games, and it didn't really do very well at all, because I didn't do any marketing, no signage, nothing. In fact, I just had a handwritten sign that I taped in the window. But over time, it started to get a little bit of a following. I think putting it on Facebook was really what turned the corner. There was an easy way for people to tell their friends and to invite people. And then it started really getting pretty popular. It grew enough that I decided to start expanding it, and I just kept growing it into other buildings, and it is what it is today. I've still not done any marketing other than put it on Facebook. Kind of my inspiration behind this place was, I've got 3 daughters, and I take them on date nights, and there just wasn't anything to do with them. I mean, you could go out to eat and you could go shopping, and there was really no other activity. And I just thought, well, that's probably something everyone's experiencing. They want to take their kids out and do something. So I thought, I want to create a family-friendly place where dads or moms can bring their kids and bond with them and connect and say, hey, here's what I did when I was growing up. Let me show you some of my world. And I didn't think growing up in the 80s that this was a time I was going to look back on fondly. But boy, it is. It was such a simpler time, and we weren't all addicted to our phones, and we didn't have like constant stimulation coming from every angle and constant pressure and stress on us. And we could just go and hang out in the arcade for 3 hours and do nothing but just talk and laugh and tell jokes. I guess that's kind of one of the reasons I did this. It's the nostalgia of a simpler time, a time when entertainment was just innocent and family friendly. You know, you can bring your kids in here and not worry about them leaving disturbed or offended or angry or hurt. So I really like giving people a place they can come, and they have no choice but to interact with their kids. Because I know every minute spent interacting in a kind way and in a fun way where they're enjoying each other's company is going to benefit them and benefit their relationship. So anything I can do to create a space where more of that happens, I'm going to do it.
And finally, on this first season of Prairie Fire, we have had a lot of fun introducing you to kind of a reanimated version of the great author Charles Dickens. He toured the Midwest as part of his grand tour of the United States in 1842, and he wrote a book about it called American Notes for General Circulation. Well, we thought that what he had to say about the Midwest was particularly rude and also really funny. So, without further ado, Charles Dickens' thoughts on the prairie and the mighty Mississippi.
American Notes for General Circulation by Charles Dickens. Chapter 13. A Jaunt to the Looking-Glass Prairie and Back. It would be difficult to say why or how, though it was possibly from having heard and read so much about the prairie, but the effect on me was disappointment. Looking towards the setting sun, there lay, stretched out before my view, a vast expanse of level ground, unbroken save by one thin line of trees, which scarcely amounted to a scratch upon the great blank. There were bare, black patches on the ground, and the few wild flowers that the eye could see were poor and scanty. Great as the picture was, its very flatness and extent, which left nothing to the imagination, tamed it down and cramped its interest. I felt little of that sense of freedom and exhilaration which a Scottish heath inspires, or even our English downs awaken. It was lonely and wild, but oppressive in its barren monotony. It is not a scene to be forgotten, but it is scarcely one, I think at all events as I saw it, to remember with much pleasure, or to covet the looking on again in afterlife.
You know, I don't think it's all that ugly here in the prairie. Don't you think you're being a little harsh?
I don't think so. You're disturbing my peace.
Well, I mean, look around you. It's pretty beautiful around here. You know, I think you're being a humbug.
Humbug? I'm not a humbug. But what a word. Humbug. Excellent. I shall remember that.
Yeah, you do that.
Yeah, I also have some thoughts on the Mississippi. Chapter 12. The Mississippi. In good time next morning, we came again in sight of the hideous waters of the Mississippi. But what words shall describe the Mississippi? Great father of rivers, who, praise be to heaven, has no young children like him. An enormous ditch, sometimes 2 or 3 miles wide, running liquid mud. Nothing pleasant in its aspect.
Excuse me, pal, but this river of mud, as you call it, powers roughly 92% of this country's total agricultural export, and roughly 78% of the world's total exports in soybeans and feed grains.
Oh, I'm surprised you even know what a percentage is.
Oh, he's a charmer, isn't he?
As I was saying, the trees were stunted in their growth. The banks were low and flat. No moving lights and shadows from swift passing clouds. No pleasant scents. No songs of birds were in the air. Hour after hour, the changeless glare of the hot, unwinking sky shone upon the same monotonous objects.
Excuse me? 60% of the birds in North America use the Mississippi River flyway to migrate. Our whole Midwestern ecosystem depends on it. Come on, man, think about it.
Rude. There was some relief in this boat, though, for the captain was a blunt, good-natured fellow. But nothing could have made head against the depressing influence of the rest of the passengers. There was a magnetism of dullness in them, which would have beaten down the most facetious companion that the earth ever knew. A jest would have been a crime, and a smile would have faded into a grinning horror. Such deadly, leaden people, such systematic plodding, weary, insupportable heaviness, such a mass of animated indigestion in respect of all that was genial, jovial, frank, social, or hearty.
Thank you to Alan Parker for playing the role of Charles Dickens. I'm Sarah Edwards. We leave you now with more gorgeous shots of Illinois from above.